It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Take Command podcast. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulson, and joining us in about 10 minutes, ESPN's Mina Kimes to talk about what she learned from the 2024 Commanders season, what, her expectations are for 2025, what they did in the offseason, all that stuff we'll get to with Mina in about 10 minutes. But Logan, of course, the story of the week is the schedule's out, which is your favorite thing in the whole wide world.
Yeah, I mean, I always have a hard time with the schedule release because it's like you've got to be a little bit clairvoyant to like make it work, So, you have your expectations, but all those expectations are kind of predicated on the last season. And I'm always in my mind, like how different, like we talk about with Mina a little bit, like how many people thought the Commanders are going to win 12 games. I wasn't one of those people. I'll tell you that right now. So again, every team changes, leadership changes, talent changes, schemes change, and sometimes you just get a little bit lucky. And so I think that's why schedule release is exciting because it kind of lets fans make their travel decisions, kind of pick the games they want to go to, kind of think about these matchups long term, which is awesome. But I'm always a little bit we got to see when we get when the game gets here and kind of as the season progresses.
Yeah, to me, schedule release is interesting because one, I get to see what my fall looks like, and looks like it's going to be a lot of late nights for your boys doing post game take commands.
Your boys.
We got Thursday night football, we got Monday night football, we got Monday night football again, then 2 Sunday nighters, plus all these 4:00 games. So lots of dark Northwest Stadium or lit up with the lights at Northwest Stadium in the background of some take command post game shows. But it's also a thing where I'm looking at the travel. When's the bye? Is there any 3 games in 8 days nonsense? And by and large, the Commanders avoided all that stuff, which is really, really nice this year. That this schedule was going to be hard on paper if you look at the quarterbacks they have to play, the quality of teams based off who they were last year. But we knew that going in because we already knew the opponents. One, you get your wild card teams in your schedule are the second place teams because you finished second in the NFC East, and the 2 divisions you have to play are the 2 divisions that sent 3 playoff teams to the playoffs last year. So, of course, it's going to look hard. But we also know that things can go sideways for teams. And, what happens, God forbid, if Jalen Hurts gets hurt and it's whoever's the backup there now, and you got the Eagles 2 times in 3 weeks, or things just totally implode in Philadelphia, as they tend to do every once in a while. We think the Eagles are going to be the best team in football, and playing them twice in 3 weeks to end the season is going to suck. What if it doesn't? What if it's 2 free wins at the end of the season? And everybody wants to fire Nick Sirianni again. So, we don't know. What we do know is if you're going to play on Thursday Night Football, I'd rather have it be in week 2. Let's have it be early and get that mini bye. You're coming off a training camp, which is long and hard. You play 2 games. Let's take a quick break, reset, and then launch into week 3. That 4 road games in 5 weeks between week 4 and week 8, that is tough, but you also have ending that with Monday Night Football, so you get a little bit of an extra rest day at the end of it. Then, getting the bye week off of Madrid, to me, that's great. If you're going to have to do the overseas deal and jet lag it up, let's have a whole week and maybe even let players stay over in Europe and have a couple days to relax to themselves or however they want to do that. So I think by and large, given that the opponents are the opponents, the schedule makers, I don't want to say did the Commanders a bunch of favors, but they didn't do them any giant disservice.
Yeah, I think the one thing that they're going to have to negotiate, honestly, is just the difference in expectation, and I think that's reflected in the schedule probably more than anywhere else, right? Everyone's talked about the 8, kind of primetime games, primetime slots or island games, and I think that can be tough, man. Those can be psychologically tough, knowing you're the only show in town, knowing the expectations, knowing everyone's watching, being in these primetime windows, and it does affect preparation a little bit. I'm not saying these are professional football players. I'm not trying to give them an excuse, but it is something to consider that's different than what they had to do last year. It's going to be different for us on the media side too. Like you said, late games, long days, long preps, and it takes a mature team to handle that. And they showed that they could handle that last year with the veteran leadership. Obviously, Zach and Bobby, they've been on teams where that's been a feature of their schedule every single year. But I think that's something that Dan Quinn and Adam Peters and the rest of the staff are going to have to negotiate, is how do we make sure that the team is ready for these big moments and these primetime moments. And think about old Commanders teams with Kirk Cousins and some of those guys where they kind of underperformed in those moments. it's a skill to get guys ready to go for that. So we'll see if Dan can pull a magic rabbit out of his hat and make that happen again this year for the team. So
I look at someone like Dan though, and I feel like they'll practice it in the spring somehow. Like they'll do something, like they'll address it. And that's the thing is I feel like, and you obviously played for a bunch of different coaches, so like you have actual experience, but as opposed to I'm just, trying to remember the best I can from covering teams. I feel like that kind of stuff was just kind of, we're in the week and we'll just here's our practice schedule. Like guys didn't know ahead of time. I feel like they'll have a meeting at some point this spring being like, hey guys, when we play at 4:25 on Sunday, this is going to be our practice schedule. When we play on Sunday Night Football, this will be our practice. Like, and you played for Dan. I don't know if he did that, but like that feels like the kind of thing that Dan would do to take the surprises out of it, which seems small, but like if everyone's just, hey, we know what we're doing, think of the stress that removes from a situation that could be very stressful because you have absolutely no routine.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I think that's something that would be really easy to do, and I probably gives you some type of competitive advantage. But I don't think I've ever played for a team that's done that. Obviously, we've talked about it. We've talked about the different schedule. We've kind of said, hey, this is going to be a longer day. We're going to do a walkthrough on Sunday before the 8:15 game, just so people up are and moving around, and we'll do an extra warm up just so we're not getting bed legs, just sitting in the bed all day. But I don't think I've been a part of a team that's actually changed the in-week practice schedule, which is interesting. And that's something that I think would be not a bad idea, especially if you've got like a 4:25 kickoff or something like that. And you normally have practice at 12. Like, what if you just practice at 2:30 or something like that? And it does throw the whole week off. And NFL players are totally creatures of habit. I think that's why teams probably don't do it that much. But it would be an interesting kind of thing just to get your body used to it. Like I had a veteran tell me, I forget who it was now that I'm thinking about it, but they were like, think about it. You practice every day at like 12:15, like every single day. That's when practice is. But all of a sudden now you have to be ready for a game at 8:30. You have to be ready for a game at 4. And he had I forget what he did. I think he would go out and do like conditioning at 4:15, like after practice, just get on the treadmill and run just to kind of get ready for it. But I do think there's something to that. And it'll be interesting to see if they can find any competitive advantage as a team in terms of preparation, because, obviously last year with the Arizona game, they found a ways to make sure that they were ready to rock and roll on a short week coming off the Monday Night Football game in Cincinnati. So, we'll see. I think that's something that would be really interesting for them to kind of explore, obviously.
Yeah, and I was just saying that as like whatever it is they decide. One, I trust that they will have thought about it. They're not going to get to week 2 and be like, oh, we're playing on Thursday. How should we handle this week, guys? Like they'll have those meetings now, and these coaches have done Thursday Night Football, whatever, before. They've done 4:25 before. They've done Sunday. They've done Monday. But to make sure that the players understand, even if it's, hey, we're going to keep our same practice schedule, we're not going to change anything. Here's what you can expect from a travel. Like my larger point of whether they tweak practice schedules or whatever is going to be, it won't be a surprise to the players if I know this coaching staff, and that lack of surprise reduces stress and should improve performance, even if it's by 1%.
And the other great thing about having that early Thursday night game is you can prep that in the offseason a little bit more. You know what I mean? You can prep it significantly more. So the short week is going to be you can manage that short week a little bit better, kind of have the scaffolding of the game plan. And so that's something I'm 100% positive they'll do. I'm sure they'll start prepping Green Bay a little bit earlier than they would normally. So they'll have 2 games on deck. And this is a type of staff that's going to definitely explore every avenue and make sure that the team's in the best position to win football games.
The thing that I do hate the most about this schedule, and I hate it for Washington, I hate it for Philadelphia, is the 2 and 3 to end the season. One, it's weird that like, hey, we're going to put Washington and Philadelphia week 18 just in case it decides the division. By the way, we're going to have Washington play on Christmas the week before. So they're going to have 10 days off going into week 18. That's a wacky bit. But 2 and 3 weeks, like to me, it's just like, it misses the point of divisional football, which is like you see teams twice a year, and it's like, you see them twice, but you see them at the same time of year. And I think part of what it means to win a division is you were the best over the course of that season, which means you see these teams early and you see them late. And I don't love conceptually, well, I understand it from like a drama building standpoint. It keeps the potential of a 2-game swing late in the season open, where that's just not available if you play one of those games earlier. I don't like it. That's it. I don't like it, Logan. And what I like should be what's made into the NFL schedule, clearly.
Yeah, definitely as a player, one of the things that I always enjoyed was when you played a division rival, like I don't want to say early in the season, but let's say you play in week 10, and you know them really well. There's a lot of familiarity, but then it gave you some competitive advantage if you had good coaching staff to be able to say, like, this is what they did to us. This is how we're going to circumvent that and kind of prep and kind of build and kind of we are who we are, but we're going to change slightly based on this information we had. And the 5 weeks in between kind of allowed that to really marinate and sink in and allowed actual change. Like it really, when you have the late games like that, it feels like you're playing the same team twice back to back. And I think, and again, like you said, there is a drama to that because the division's never really out of reach until the last game of the season. And that's always fun and exciting. But it is, I think it kind of cheapens it a little bit. That's just my personal opinion. I'm sure there's other people that would feel differently about it.
Yeah.
I think the other one too is having the Christmas game in there. That's always tough, man. It's always tough playing on a holiday. Like that's one where it's like, man, and you're playing the Cowboys, division rival, like that's really challenging. And hopefully the 10 days off help them get ready for the Eagles. But having done that a couple times on Thanksgiving and on Christmas, like that's one where it's really hard to keep the team motivated and focused because you got people coming into town. You got your wife asking, if we got to schedule something. So that's something that'll be interesting to see how they manage that. Again, Eagles on both sides of a Christmas Day game. That's going to be a tough stretch of the schedule for sure.
To me, my inclination is I'd rather have that Christmas Day game at home, and I can at least if I got family, I can open some presents with the kids real quick in the morning and then be like, all right, Daddy will see you after the game. You still have Christmas night at home versus travel. You agree with that?
No, 100%. Like, and again, that's if you're playing a holiday game, you definitely want it at home, right? So you can do that stuff. You can, have time with the kids. You can get back home in time, or even if it's not that night, the kids go to bed early. You can do Christmas early in the morning next day, and you're not flying back at 3 a.m. because you're coming from Dallas or whatever. So I definitely think that's that if you're going to do it away, it's better to have it at home for sure.
Last thing, you will presumably be at all the games again this year, doing the radio broadcast. So, which trip are you most looking forward to? And if it's Madrid, then give me a second one too.
Yeah, I was going to say Madrid because again, I've never been to Spain, and I was actually just talking to my friends about, maybe I can get my wife out there and we can have like a little, like a little mini vacation. Because again, I'm not playing, so as long as I'm prepped for the game, like everything will be.
I definitely haven't not looked at flights, Logan, even on my end of it, and I don't get to be a part of anything. I just would be over there, doing a little bit of work, and then be like, hey, look at me, I'm in Madrid.
Yeah, in terms of trips, I'm not a huge trip guy, but I do think Lambeau, like playing at that stadium is a really cool experience. It's got some really cool history there, which I appreciate. The Chiefs, obviously barbecue, like that's a cool city to visit. But the one that I just eyeballing the schedule right now that I'm like ecstatic for is the Eagles Week 18. I can't help myself. I think that's a great place to play. I always enjoyed playing there. Like the hostility of the Philly crowd's tremendous. And in a game that could have division implications, like that's the one, man. Like that's the one I get like kind of chills thinking about like how good Philly is, how good they've been, how good this team could be at that moment in a playoff type atmosphere amongst division rivals. Like it kind of harkens me back to 2012 when we played the Dallas Cowboys at home, for the division. Like that gets me juiced up. Division football, last game of the year in a hostile environment, like that'll be super sick.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Anthony and I annually, the day after the schedule comes out, do a road trip draft. So I'm starting to put together my my power rankings for that we'll do on the radio show.
Yeah, and Philly's not a great, I don't like going to Philly, but like the game will be.
The game is great. Man, I can help you enjoy Philly more. I got a restaurant list. You know that's where Rachel's from. So like we got you hooked up.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we'll get you hooked up with some better restaurant choices in Philadelphia. Go beyond. There's nothing wrong with the cheesesteak, but we can get you beyond a cheesesteak. Have you enjoy Philly a little bit more, and then go have a nice hostile day at the Link. All right,
dude.
We will
hostile
we'll have
day at the Link. I love it.
Yeah, it's just he's all jazzed up now. Settle down. It's May 15th. All right, when we get back, Mina Kimes joins us here on Take Command. Our guest today, back with us for a second straight year in the offseason, is ESPN's Mina Kimes. Of course, you can catch her on NFL Live. You can also check out her podcast, The Mina Kimes Show, featuring Lenny. Mina, I did think about trying to come up with like a dog joke off the top, Lenny style, but I didn't trust to be on your level, so I just skipped that part.
We did a lot of jokes about the Commanders when the first dog was named Commander. Do you guys remember the dog who was biting
the team dog? Yeah,
we were Team Commander, even though he kept biting.
Biden's dog.
Oh, sorry,
because there was also a team dog that was friendly, but then Biden had a dog named Commander who was
he was just biting security guys. Yeah. Anyways,
wasn't great. So that's it. We'll just go with that throwback. We've now saluted Lenny properly here off the top with Mina, but we wanted to bring Mina on to kind of ask a question and get into a fun discussion about team building, because on some level, all of us missed on the 2024 Washington Commanders. It was we thought they might be okay, they might be bad. There's this problem, there's that problem, and then all of a sudden they won 12 games, went to the NFC Championship game, and we're all scratching our heads going like, how in the world did that happen? And Logan, you and I have talked about this obviously quite a bit. I've asked everybody I can possibly ask kind of the generic version of the question I'm going to start with, Mina, which is like, what did you learn about how a team can win in the NFL by watching the 2024 Washington Commanders that has informed maybe the way you think about team building and such entering the 2025 offseason, now most of the way through the 2025 offseason?
Well, I think I'll start with kind of my biggest miss on them and why I think if I had to pinpoint why I underestimated them the most and why I think they surpassed expectations, it really starts with the offensive line, which I believe you sent me like a long email about. I mean, was it not that long? But
a friendly few paragraphs.
Where I was, because I think when we were doing the preseason, I was like, I like Jay Daniels, like a lot of these players, but I don't know, this offensive line, I feel like could take the season before it even gets on the ground. That was my biggest concern about the team. And you pointed out, I think at the time, and this proved to be true, that, they just brought in a lot of competent vets and raised the floor enough with those free agent additions. Brandon Coleman was like, well, who knew if like a third round pick was going to be semi-decent, he was. Obviously they've upgraded in multiple ways, but that gave them a level of competency that I didn't expect. And I think just the fact that they placed an emphasis on getting experience in at that position group really helped elevate the floor of the offense. The ceiling obviously was mostly because of the young quarterback, but I thought that was something when I look back on why the season turned out the way it is, that was the thing I missed the most. And I think maybe one of the biggest takeaways I have.
Yeah, I think the other thing, real quick, Logan, that I mentioned in that note, was too, like the coaching schematic element of it, where Bieniemy in 23 just hung Sam Howell out to dry, and quarterbacks, we also know sacks can be such a quarterback stat, and we saw Jaden avoid some of the sack taking that he had at LSU, which I know was a concern as well. So I think that also meshes well with what you and Kevin said on the most recent version of your show when talking about why the Eagles have been so good. They understand that, team building is done through the trenches, and obviously the Commanders prioritize that in a way that I don't think we fully appreciated until we were deeper into the season.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, I go back to because if you just looked at the paper and said personnel decisions, I think you're totally right. There's not a lot to be super excited about. You get Allegretti, who's kind of been a swing guard. Wiley was kind of a swing tackle for a while, but I do think there's the schematic element is something that I definitely underrated. And I think, seeing Cliff in a full-time offensive coordinator role, what were your takeaways from him? Because I look at what he did with the offensive line, what he did with the quarterback, and how he elevated not only Jaden, but really the entire offense. And so I think we always talk about Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Andy Reid who's that can get it done. But I felt like he showed a lot of that last year in terms of elevating the personnel.
Yeah, I agree. I first few weeks of the season, I was just like, literally the first 2 weeks, I was like, yeah, here we go again. Just 2.1 average depth of target. If I remember correctly, I don't know what your guys' experience was watching those games, but I was like, oh, this is going to be good run game, an inordinate amount of screens, not really going to push the ball downfield. And then he really opened up the passing game as the year went along in a way that I thought was really impressive. Cliff Kingsbury, in Arizona, I was always surprisingly, I always felt like he deserved more credit maybe than he got for how creative and dynamic the run game was in Arizona. And that is something you certainly saw continue with this Commanders team throughout the season. So that wasn't surprising per se. But I do think, as the year went on, I know there's always talk about Cliff Kingsbury and what happens in the second half of the season. I saw tweaks with regards to the capabilities of the quarterback and then some of the personnel as they were kind of figuring out their roles that I thought were really impressive. I think, like, again, just the way that they use tempo as a weapon. There were things that he did that we saw at earlier points in his career, but I thought very just constantly saw smart game plans and smart in-game adjustments, and that was really impressive to me.
I think the other question I think about a lot when I think about, asking myself, what did we miss in 2024, was the culture element of it. And you referenced, you and Kevin Clark did your annual coach and GM rankings on your show. And one of the guys that you had in the top 5 was Dan Campbell, who, while I think also is underrated in terms of what he brings schematically. And like, he's a very, very smart football guy, not just a culture guy. Yeah. Obviously his defining feature is he is a culture builder. Where do you put Dan Quinn kind of on your list, and what kind of boost do you think that gave, an organization that gave to the Commanders last year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was phenomenal last season. Something specific that I don't know if we talked about it enough was how aggressive he was, and which you mentioned Dan Campbell, and that kind of clicked him out. I mean, I guess they kind of look alike too, but they're definitely the two coaches you would rank in your top 5 if you were doing a battle royale between all the NFL coaches, that's for sure. But I think, and it wasn't like he was actually conservative in his first stint with Atlanta going back. I have to look it up, but I remember he was definitely not, for a defensive coach, on the conservative side, or like frustratingly so. And that some of that had to do with having like one of the greatest offenses in NFL history, of course. But I think, with this team, again, realizing how unbelievably effective they were on fourth down for a litany of reasons, I really liked what he showed us as a game manager, the way he approached also games where they weren't supposed to win. And you have a coach like that who understands if you're the underdog, you're going to coach aggressively. I think it's really impressive. So just to pinpoint a specific thing, I thought he did really well, aside from all the other thing that obviously like players love the dude and would run through a wall for him. And that's been the case at every single stage of his coaching career, from Atlanta to when he was a coordinator in Dallas.
And that's something that I'm glad you brought up, because I think it's something that I think about with the team last year in terms of missing. Like, I don't think anyone could have predicted like an 87% fourth down conversion rate. Like, I don't think anybody could have predicted that. And everyone talks
about the best in NFL history? That
one. And so I look at like what Cliff did, and like Cliff did a lot of good stuff. Jaden did a lot of good stuff. But like, when you are converting at that kind of percentage, like, it just it stacks the deck in your favor. So how much of it is just, I don't want to say statistical variance, because, I'm a fan of the Commanders. I want it to be something more concrete, something more palatable, the culture, all this. But how much does that play a role? And even the third down conversion, they were 45%, I think, was third best in the NFL. Both those numbers are very volatile. Like, is it just that offensively, or is there something more going on here?
I think when you have a quarterback who's both
an elite, by the way, solid
I got to think it through it, because the nerd in me is like, there's always going to be a little bit of regression. I mean, if you have a number like that, it's going to regress. But also, if you have a quarterback who's both an elite decision maker and a top, whatever he is, dual threat quarterback in the NFL, you're, just from a pure numbers perspective, we're speaking about fourth down in particular, you're always just going to create, it's the same, with the Bills and Josh Allen. It's a very different type of runner, but, and obviously the Eagles being the case study for that. So you're always going to be better than expected on fourth down. And then you also have, a good power back, a good creative run game. You have, I think, like players who are very good on screens as well, not on fourth down, but just thinking about some of the third down stuff too. I think that's the other thing, to go back to third down, like the Commander, I'd have to look up how often they were in third and long. I don't think it was anything.
Well, that's something they worked the hell out of, right? They're really, I remember like in spring and in summer, like one of the drills they did, which was unusual, I thought, was they spent a lot of time in 2nd and 10. So they're trying to get to third manageable all the time. And you see the way Cliff calls games, like I cover the team, so I watch every single game. Obviously you got a lot of stuff to worry about, but that like getting to 3rd and 5, some like the number one priority for him as a play caller.
Yeah. I want to go and look this up, but it felt like, Jane, when you have like a quarterback who's an elite distributor, and again, like seems to always make the right decision on third down, but it didn't feel like it was like, hey, Jaden, go make a play a lot of the time. I mean, this is what's so interesting about him being a rookie quarterback and playing the way he did. It was like, no, it's third and manageable, and he knows, he's going to make the right decision, read the coverage correctly, put the football in the exact right place, and it's going to be just enough every time, it felt like. So, you put a lot of that on Cliff and a lot of that on their approach to how they got to third down, but I think a lot of that has to do with the young quarterback as well.
So as someone who does study the league, and has seen teams that can consistently do this versus teams that maybe it is more of a statistical anomaly in any given season, do you think the Commanders can, what of the Commanders 2024 is repeatable based off of their personnel, based off of the fact that they brought back all their coaches kind of against the grain? When you're this good, you typically don't get a second crack at it, but they're going to. What is repeatable for them, especially offensively, in some of the ways that they approach the game in 2025 in your mind?
Yeah, I think offensively, if I was looking for something that I would be concerned about, I thought the line did play ski a little bit over I don't know what the expression is, but the Commanders recognized that, which I think really you got to acknowledge. I know we started off by saying the offensive line was better than I expected. They still weren't good. And I think that was very obvious at the end of the season, right? This was not, it was just, there was such a profound mismatch, the line of scrimmage with Philadelphia and some of the other teams in the NFL. And I think for the team to not only be aggressive in pursuing Tunsil, but then also, again, double dip at that position, I thought was really smart team building, to go back to kind of the premise. So, they weren't just okay, cool, we had this unbelievably efficient offense and a rookie quarterback and one of the best rookie quarter seasons of all time. Let's just run it back. They didn't. I think that is, and we can get to the Debo addition as well, which I think also plays into the third and fourth down stuff. But yeah, so I think that alone will stave off a lot of the regression that you might see, because there were areas I would say, some of the big plays. I wouldn't say there were busted coverages, but you got a lot of one-on-ones with Terry McLaurin that you might not get otherwise. So much of the comebacks were powered by, go balls, which is Jane Daniels' specialty. And they'll still be on the table, no doubt, but defenses will obviously play them differently. But again, if the offensive line improves and then you have a yards after catch weapon like Deebo Samuel, you can neutralize that or mitigate it to some degree.
So I got kind of a football nerdy question. How, obviously you get better people in, right?
Yes, my favorite kind. Let's go.
Yeah. You get better people in, you spend a first round draft pick on an offensive lineman, right? And we talked about how, the offensive line kind of was over their skis a little bit last year. But just getting more talented pieces does not a good offensive line make. There's a galvanization that needs to happen. And does that need to be accounted for when you're kind of assessing how they're going to be in 2025? You know what I'm saying? Is it, how do you know, you just trust in coaching again and saying, oh, they did it once before, they can do it again? Or is it just kind of flip a coin and hope you're right kind of deal?
You mean with the offensive line in particular?
Correct.
Or with
With the offensive line, because anytime you add new pieces, it's always a little bit everyone says on paper you should be better, but we've seen that millions of times not play out. Yeah, no,
it's I think the one thing I like about it is the combination of veteran and a veteran addition and youth to sort of address that, because I think it would be one thing for them to expecting you can strike gold to get we got a third rounder. He came in and he was decent in Brandon Coleman. Josh Connerly's going to come in and be a productive starter right away. I wouldn't like that bet, but the fact that they did both him and I love when teams generally approach a position with both a veteran and a young player. It's just kind of a thing I really like team building anyways, whether it's at, bookend tackles or linebackers, tight ends, learning from each other. It's kind of I think it's really the smartest way to build a team from a developmental standpoint, and then competing in the short and the long term. So I think the way they approached it to me was perfect, frankly, to avoid what you're talking about. I think it's also possible though that they might ask more of them, right? They might not be in as much, there might be a little bit of the run game is a thing where actually it's funny. We were talking about regression and I was saying, I felt that they'd be able to stave off some issues with the pass game. I think the run game that'll be an interesting thing to see. I again, having Jaden back there, it's similar to with Lamar, just helps you so much in the run game. And Cliff is a very creative run caller as well. It's a really fun rushing attack to watch. It's not my favorite room backs in the league. And it's not that they didn't. I guess they drafted someone. Sorry, late, right?
They got Bill late. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, best nickname in the draft.
And say I have strong takes on him or watched him.
He's a 7th round pick. We'll see.
Okay. So you always get a natural boost from those circumstances in that context, but I do think that you could see potentially some regression there.
I think, we've spent 15 minutes talking about the offense, and we're pretty sure the offense, even if it regresses and it's the 10th best offense, like, okay, cool, you have a top 10 offense. If it gets better and it's top 5 offense, like, cool, we're partying. The defense is the bigger question, probably, about this team. They make the Kinlaw signing where everyone throws up their hands and goes, that seems like a lot of money for him. They get Trey Amos in the second round of the draft. Other than that, they kind of run it back. They lose Jeremy Chin. Where are you at on not just like where the Commanders' defense is, but where they need to be able to make another run in the playoffs if the offense is going to be what we think it's going to be? Yeah.
I sure wish they had another pass rusher. I'm not going to lie to you guys.
I think between saying that this group of backs is not your favorite in the league and the pass rushers, you wish they had another one. Every single Commanders fan is like, okay, yes, Mina. Yeah, that is what we have been saying too. And Logan and Craig keep telling us to chill out.
Yeah, it's like the defense in some ways is more of a candidate for, and to say they're a candidate for regression, well, they weren't great last year, but I actually had some pretty good games down the stretch. And I do struggle to find a lot of improvement. First of all, I really like Trey Amos. He was one of my favorite. I talked about him a lot ahead of the draft, and I actually didn't see that pick when it happened in real time. And I think he's like a perfect scheme fit for Quinn and Joe Witt, and I love that they can move Mikey back inside. So on the back end, I actually think even with Chin gone, you might see some improvement, especially if Lattimore, again, more further removed from his injury, plays. I think he will be better than he was for the Commanders last year. But the front, it's just not a strong pass rushing front. And I think there's going to be a lot of onus on the offense to put them in situations where they're not having to rush the passer aggressively. And that makes me a little uncomfortable.
Well, I do think this is an interesting kind of philosophical point about but I do think that they brought in a bunch of guys who make them better on first and second down. Better versus the run. And again, if you're in more pass rushing opportunities, even if you're not a good pass rushing group, just percentages wise, you should be able to create more pressures as a team. And again, they have two of the best blitzing linebackers in the NFL, and Joe Witt Jr. knows how to use them. So again, like if they're better on first and second down and they're in more third and long situations, which again, they had a really tough time last year on first and second down stopping the run. If they're better in that area, and from a personnel standpoint, they should be, do you see a world where they're a little bit more efficient defensively?
Yeah, I guess to go back to kind of like the complementary football aspect of it. Yeah, right. Like if they're, ahead too, like that.
Great, right? Crushing it.
Yeah, I think the run defense should be improved. And obviously you're in division with Philadelphia, so that's always like job number one, right? And, I was a big fan of Newton as a prospect, and obviously his developmental curve has been kind of affected by the injuries. I still think he has a higher ceiling than what he has shown. You got some flashes of it, I think, as a pass rusher. I think he could be, there was a couple plays too down the stretch where I was like, that's the guy I saw at Illinois. So I think if he can hit another level, rushing from the inside, that will help a great deal as well. He's obviously a little undersized as a run defender. But I think that, it really is about like complementary football for them. And I think that's what you saw play out a lot last year, frankly. So, there's pressure on the offense to help the defense because the offense has the capability to, be up there again with any in the league. The defense, probably the worst in the division.
Depends on how leaky the Giants back end wants to be this year.
Yeah, the Giants front is.
Yeah, their front's sick, nasty, but their back end is sick in a different way.
Commander, the Cowboys are the opposite. They can obviously get after the quarterback, but I don't think that run defense is going to be fixed at all. So it's definitely a lot of pressure on the offense. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. So you guys did not only the coach rankings, but the GM rankings, and you have a lot of folks, obviously, at the top of that list who have long track records of success. This is only year 2 for Adam Peters.
Yeah.
So I'll ask the question. I'll sports radio it up for you this way, Mina. Next year, what are the chances that Adam Peters is sniffing around that top 5?
I think if the top two picks who I like a lot hit this year and they can find another late round gem, then you got to consider it. I was just pulling up the depth chart to kind of look at like the decisions that he's made, and but it's not just drafts. Obviously, you got to consider. I mean, last year, what they did with the offensive line, to go back to that, like building it on the relative cheap and fielding a competent unit, I think that he deserves a ton of credit for. And it's a lot of friends of Dan, Quinn, in terms of like some of the free agents. And I think you would need some of those to work out. The Kinlaw one is one that I raised my eyebrows at, but maybe he comes in and balls out, and then you would certainly hold him in high regard that way. Debo trade
this year was the Friends of Adam.
Ifs. Yeah, Friends of Adam. Yeah, right. Sorry, those are right. Last year was Friends of Dan. This year's Friends of Adam. I think like some of these free agent trade acquisitions, Tunsil and Debo have to really produce, and then if they do, I think then you're like, okay, great. Like this, some really good decisions made. He hasn't really gotten to any extensions yet, so that's not something we're like evaluating with this team. But those are the two players that I'm probably, and then Lattimore as well. I mean, those are big swings. Like he gave up significant draft cap, but then you traded Dotson and got a great return for him, so he deserves credit for that as well. But I would say like the big swings he's taken have to work out. Lattimore, Tunsil, Debo's not really a big swing. Lattimore and Tunsil are the two players I'm looking at this year for me to feel.
Does he get any credit for Jaden Daniels?
Nah. I mean, you
got to make the right call, man.
Yeah, you did got to make the right call.
Right? So, like, we're saying a lot of ifs, but here we go. Quarterback, that's a big deal.
I know, but like...
And I think on your show, you were talking about how, like, you give credit to, what's his name, for finding Josh Allen, right? Like, and I know we got a lot to prove here with Jaden Daniels, but he feels like he's got that magic pixie dust on him. So, I don't know.
He does. And obviously... he chose him over. I mean, Drake May's really great too, though. Like, that was my God. Watching the guys this year, I was like, "Geez, you guys were like, holy smokes!" The whole top of last year's draft was just so much
amazing.
Better. Yeah. It's like remarkable.
I think, like in a way, the Jaden discussion ties it all together, though, right? Is like if we're going to talk about culture and talent identification and fit, and like, okay, if this guy's a 9 talent, how do we make sure that he performs at a 9 and not a 7? And like some of that is the culture stuff and making sure that it's in the right thing. Like, I think Drake is well put together and like a great leader and all these things too. But just Jaden has that magic thing that as you're restarting the franchise in the way that they were, it just feels like the absolute perfect fit. And for like, I think everyone could watch Jaden in college and what he did and be like, yeah, that guy's pretty good at football. But to on the personal level, to understand how to get the best out of him from front office to coaching staff, like that I think you do have to give them some level of credit for.
I mean, he also, the development of him. I mean, he also just, I liked him. I liked all the top 3. I thought they would all be good. And obviously Caleb had his ups and downs and, but Jay Daniels even exceeded I was like, that's a great second overall pick. Makes sense. He was better than I thought in some specific ways that, who we attribute credit to, but like the playmaking in particular, that feels like him. I mean, you guys watched him, I'm sure, a lot in college after the pick and just generally. He wasn't really a playmaker in college. He was unbelievably cerebral, great arm, so many, just a pure pocket passer, but he didn't make a lot of throws on the run. And like he was a good dual threat quarterback, but he was small, and there was questions about how that would translate I had questions about how that would translate to the NFL. He took a lot of really ugly hits in college. What he did last year as a playmaker in particular wildly exceeded my expectations. And I don't know how much you put that on. Maybe, the front office saw that capability, maybe the coach, but he's just got that dog in him. Like at a certain point, it's just like, okay, that's just something he had in his bag the entire time. I thought it was remarkable.
So no credit, huh? That's tough. That's a tough eval, Mina.
Congratulations on picking the Heisman Award winner. Quarterback who won the national year.
But people screw it up all the time, man.
That's true. That's true. It worked out for sure. It worked out.
By the way, you see the excerpt that just came out from your colleague Seth Wickersham's new book on Caleb. Oof. That was.
You know what though? He's lucky, Caleb, that came out now instead of ahead of the season, because ahead of the season everybody would have been killing him, but now everyone's like, points were made. Like,
I can't do it with Shane Waldron. Yeah, no, we saw that. Thanks so much. It's probably why he was. fired very early in the season. By the way, Bears Commanders rematch on Monday Night Football on ESPN. I think that's week 6. As the schedule
we'll be
just
there.
dropped. Yeah, so
It's in Washington.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll be there. Yeah.
All right, we'll see you. We'll see you week 6. In the meantime, anything else on like just the general like team building side of it that you think is worth pointing out when you think about how Washington put it all together, and then seeing, I think the other thing too, Mina, is like how they acted in the 2025 offseason, where it's like, okay, we saw one version of what their stated principles look like in kind of a methods way in year one. We've now seen another year of how they go about their business and what thoughts that spark for you as we wrap up here.
I just love that I really like the draft, and I wish I'd spent more time talking about it on my show. Connerly Jr. was a player I just really, really liked. I started watching Oregon early on in the process, and I just couldn't take my eyes off him. I thought he had as high a ceiling as any tackle in this draft, to be honest. And so I thought that was it was a team that came in with such a glaring need at pass rusher, but then took the best players available. And it's hard for me to begrudge them that, especially because I like to go back to the team building point. I like the fact that they were, I know I'm kind of repeating myself now, but both aggressive in free agency at trade, but also, didn't say, okay, we're going to bring in these older guys and that's it. No, we're going to bring in young players at those exact same positions. I just think that's really smart team building because you both hedge in the current, if Tencel or Lattimore get injured again, very possible, you've got a hedge, but you also have a long-term plan. And I think that's just very clever.
Mina Kimes, catch her on NFL Live. Of course, the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny as well. And Mina, we always appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us again here on Take Command. Thanks again to Mina Kimes for joining us here on Take Command. Of course, that's Logan Paulson. I am Craig Hoffman. So, Logan, a couple things that we want to just react to off the conversation with Mina. First and foremost, Mina, it's funny she brought up that email that I sent her last year, and I just listened to her show, and I was like, hey, something to keep in mind, because like Mina and I knew each other a little bit at that point, and so we occasionally exchange like Commanders emails, and I was like, just food for thought. Eric Bieniemy didn't do great last year. And right. Schematically, I think that they can be a lot better. But to see just how much that impacted the team is, I think, something that is a really great lesson from last year. I think there's also, good quarterback play, very helpful. And sometimes we kind of passed by that. And then, I know that something else that caught you a little by surprise was, the credit level for Adam Peters on knowing that Jaden was the guy. Yeah. But let's start off with the offensive line. Like what stood out to you about that conversation, especially when you think about projecting into this 2025 offensive line, which on paper is a lot better?
Yeah, it made me really think back to how good a job Cliff did with the offensive line, how good a job Adam did in terms of getting guys that were like serviceable starters. And again, like people sleep on, they paid Allegretti like a swing guy, but he was good enough to start for them for a year. And then now they've kind of been able to, relegate him at some point to being that true swing player. Same thing with Wiley. And I think they've just made really smart decisions. But I think Cliff understanding that position group was evident every single week we watched, and it was something that we didn't really talk about, but and she touched on it a little bit, but the coaching impact on that, and you talked about it in your email, EB was pretty much like, hey, we're going to do the hardest thing for the offensive line more than anybody else in the NFL. I don't care if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you're going to look bad. I think if you look at some of the drop back passing statistics for the Eagles, when Hurts holds the ball a long time, they have a crazy high pressure rate. That's just part of the nature of doing that in the NFL, right? Then you get Cliff in here with Jaden Daniels, who has this tremendous release. We're going to run a ton of quick game. We're going to run a ton of RPO. That's going to be our foundational backbone. We're going to be crazy efficient at that. We're going to run the football, and then we're going to be selective about when to take shot plays down the field. And I look at Kyle, I look at Sean, I look at Andy Reid, I look at all these coordinators. They understand at the highest level the hardest thing to do in the offense outside of play quarterback is play offensive line. So I need to protect that group. And Cliff did a great job of protecting them. And you see the impact schematically of what a coach can do to elevate a group. And I think that's just so important. And now I think the other point she brought up, which was interesting, is now it's a new group of guys coming together. Does Cliff change his philosophy? Does he kind of put them more out to dry because they're more talented? All those different things. However, I also thought she brought up a great point where she was bringing a veteran in with a young guy is a great way to mitigate some of that risk. So I give credit to Adam Peters in that regard, saying Adam did a great job identifying like this issue, doing something to correct it, and then moving on. So I think she brought up a lot of good points, but the one kind of takeaway that I feel kind of most strongly about is Cliff and his impact on that group and on the decisions that Adam made with the offensive line.
Totally. And just it's something that you have really taught me, I think, over our years of doing this, is like count the dropbacks, count the situation. This goes to like all the third and fourth down stuff that we're talking about too, right? Is how do you avoid pure dropbacks where the offensive line just has to block? And it's like, hey guys, no play action. The ball's not going to be coming out quickly. Like, you are going to have to stand up and pass block for 3+ seconds here. And if you can avoid those situations, whether it's because schematically you do smart things and you provide help with chips, or your run game is efficient, or you're providing, whatever, or even like third and fourth down, we're going to go for it. If on fourth down, we can get to fourth and short, that adds some things to the playbook, because if it's 3rd and 8, a lot of teams are like, oh, this is pure drop back. And you can run quick game and get 6 and know that you're going to go for it on 4th and 2. That changes a lot of stuff for you. And so I think that's a really good point. And then it's going to be fun to me to see how much more Cliff puts on those guys' plates, knowing that, like, okay, my left tackle is no longer a 3rd-round rookie who's like doing a decent enough job. It's Laramie Tunsil, who at his best is the best in the entire league.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So I'm really, it's cool. It was cool to see Cliff make those decisions, but now it's cool to think about what he can do, to kind of like, because, I was talking to somebody and they were saying, I was like, what's the biggest difference in San Francisco's offense, right? They're really struggling this year. Is it Brandon Ayuk being out? Is it Deebo Samuel's injury? Is it Christian McCaffrey being out? And the first thing this dude said to me, he was like, Trent Williams is not out there. And Trent Williams is a playmaker at the left tackle spot. It lets you do so much different stuff with the protections. He's a playmaker. And I think like that's what this gives you. And so I do think Cliff understands that. I think he's aware of that. I think that's one of the reasons Adam was so aggressive in bringing that type of player in. And then you say to yourself, okay, now what can he do? Now how can he continue to help Jaden Daniels grow? Now how can he continue to mature this offense? Because again, they were walking that razor's edge for a long time. 4th down conversions, crazy percentages, 3rd downs. Like, you don't want to be living there all the time. And so now can you kind of blossom the offense in a way that you couldn't before? So again, it's cool that Cliff's aware of that, but now I'm kind of excited to see what he can do when that restriction's not there anymore and he can color outside the lines a little bit. So hopefully that's what Laramie Tunsil allows him to do. Hopefully he plays at a crazy high level, because if he does, man, this offense, again, just from that one piece being added, could be drastically different.
So then let's, before we get to the defense stuff, talk about where we ended with Mina, which is the Jaden part of it. When we think about how good Adam Peters has been and what are the chances that he's kind of creeping up towards the top of those GM rankings next year. Why do you think he deserves more credit than she does? Because that feels like very sports talk show that I hate. But like, what struck you about the way she processed that you thought was interesting and
I was just surprised, because she was just like, you couldn't screw it up. Like, there were 3 awesome dudes there, but I think you can screw it up. I think we've seen people screw it up. I think there's been generational, like, look no farther than Trevor Lawrence, right? Look no farther than Justin Herbert at points in his career. Like, I think Justin Herbert's a heck of a football player, but there were times where he was mismanaged and it hurt him. It hurt his development, hurt the team's development. And we've talked about this a ton. And, part of it is because we cover the team every single day.
Sure.
And she's maybe not as familiar with it. But, like, I look at what they did in terms of saying, hey, you're not the starter right away. Marcus Mariota's the starter, right? And not only bringing Marcus Mariota as a great mentor, but having Cliff come in and build an offense around him. Look at what they did with Williams up in Chicago. Like, that offense was tough. Very difficult for a young quarterback to manage. They could have done that. They could have screwed it up, right? Drake May behind a terrible offensive line. What was the first free agent moves that they made here when Adam came in? We're going to build the offensive line. We're going to find those. Like, as you
even before that, the first thing was, we're going to get you a safety blanket, and his name is Zach Ertz, because he was available before free agency even opened last year.
And they made those consistently good, strong decisions. And every year you're like, man, this is a bad environment for a quarterback. And I thought it was when the offseason started, I was like, this is a bad environment. But they slowly built something up around him. So the way they handled him, the way he didn't have to do all this crazy media stuff. Like, I just think you, as an organization, you deserve credit for that. Because, like, you can have the most talented guy in the world, but if you mismanage it and you don't handle it effectively. And the other thing I want to just point to too is, like, Adam he said this multiple places, and I believe him because I've heard it from other people outside of Adam, that Jaden Daniels was his number one player ahead of Caleb Williams, ahead of Drake May. And so to have that evaluation so locked in on whatever he saw, the decision-making, the quick feet, the quick release, that playmaking moxie, Mina said that he wasn't a true playmaker in college. He wasn't a playmaker in terms of throwing on the run, but he was a playmaker with his legs. And I think there's a distinction there. And so identifying what that can be and how you can manage that, I think is extremely important. So I look at all those decisions, and if you reverse them, if you make the opposite decision in those cases, this could go drastically different, right? And I think that's one thing I would point to and just be like, hey, like there is credit that is deserving there, even though Jaden Daniels is a tremendous talent.
This is probably a podcast episode in itself that nobody wants because everyone just wants to be like, we got Jaden, we're the best, let's keep it moving forward. But like a fun hypothetical is like, what happens if Drake is here? What happens if Caleb is here? And both of them are better than where they are in their current situations.
Yes,
like
100%.
Straight up, no doubt,
100%.
And I think that becomes an interesting thing. And I feel like the way we were talking about with Mina was more of like just making the pick of Jaden versus Drake versus Caleb. And I do think that like, what you said in terms of that they would have taken Jaden number one had they had the number one pick, like then you get a lot more credit because everyone said it should have been Caleb, right? They didn't have to do that. And so how do you give credit for something that they didn't actually have to do of step out on that ledge? But I do think like to your point, the organizational and where you draw the line between a guy like Adam versus other people in the organization and obviously Dan in the locker room, it's hard and it's blurry, but like that actually in its own way is a compliment to the way that the Commanders have this thing set up, is that they are all in lockstep together. And so I get what she's saying of like, all these guys were awesome and they've done a good job organizationally, that I don't know how much credit you get for picking one over the other because they all probably would have been some level of successful. But I also get what you're saying of like that in itself is worthy of praise at, hey, this is how the best organizations operate. So I kind of get what both of you are saying, and now everyone's going to be mad at me in the comments for being mealy mouthed in the middle.
Well, I think it's a great point because I think when you listen to her show, like one of the things she does a really good job of is making distinctions between the coaches. You should definitely check out the podcast, by the way. It was I listened. Yeah,
the most recent one she did with Kevin Clark, they ranked the top 5 coaches and GMs, and the point that you're about to bring up, I thought was a really good one.
Yeah, so like she does a really good job of being like, this is what the coach does, this is what the GM does, right? And I think like when you look at it, you're like, man, like these are great points. These are why these guys are special in their professions, right? But the thing that gets me is like here, it's both of them. Like they're working together to create the ecosystem. And so I'd be really curious to see, because again, like I think there's the way she's ranking them is different than the way I think the value of their relationship is here, right? The reason it's so good is because they work so well together, like you were alluding to. There, she's drawing stark distinctions between this is the coach, this is the GM. And I think that's what makes this organization special. And that's what makes the handling of Jaden Daniels special too. That's what makes the handling of every pick they've made special, right? Is that there's this, Adam understands what Dan wants and needs. He understands the value assigned in the draft. He understands the value assigned in free agency and trade, makes those decisions, and then he trusts Dan to develop those products. Like Jerzon Newton, like one of the things that she talked about was how much Jerzon had improved over the course of the season. You see that. That doesn't just happen. Like obviously you need the right person, but you need the right coaches. Like I look at Darryl Tapp and the energy and juice he brings, what Ryan does for the pass rushers, like they're counting on those guys to develop and be something more in a way that other teams I've been on can't do, right? You need a higher floor player because you're not counting on the staff to develop. You need more veterans in the building because the staff can't develop. So that's where it's interesting. And that distinction is interesting. And it'll be interesting to see as this team progresses, like if they do eventually break in kind of in their own right as a front office person or as a coach.
Yeah, let's say like for this year that Quinn is the 12th or 13th best coach, and I'm just putting that out there because they didn't have DQ in their top 10, either Mina or Kevin, right? And that might sound really offensive to Commanders fans, but like the guys they list, like these are good
like they went through that list, and I was like, oh, he should be in here, and then I like listened to him, I was like, damn, these are like some really good,
and the separation between
coaches,
the separation between maybe DQ at 13 and some of the guys that are at 7 are like. If you want to flip them, that's fine with me. But let's say for the sake of argument, right? DQ is 13th and Adam is 11th, right? And it just gets 1 year, whatever. together they might be in the top 10. Like if you take the
I think
pairings
so.
and the fit, like and 1 + 1 = 3 type of stuff, I think that how well they work well together certainly elevates them both. Which leads us to DQ is gonna have to be on his stuff defensively this year, because I think that I don't think we disagree with Mina or anybody in their comment section or whoever. Like, it would be sick if they could get another pass rusher. If Trey Hendrickson finds a way to weasel his way out of Cincinnati for something that is affordable, absolutely, I'm interested in Trey Hendrickson. Like, getting another pass rusher in here would be great. But there's a cost element to that, and there is just the market doesn't provide you a lot of opportunities to get pass rushers. And so I see both the point that she was making, that everyone's making, that I have also made, like, yeah, it'd be cool if they went and got another edge, with the reality that they might have actually done the best that the market allowed them to do.
Yeah, I think this is one where it's like my talent evaluation part of me feels differently than my coach evaluation, right? Because I kind of try to look at it through both lenses, right? So obviously, like, I'm like, they need to be more talented at edge rusher, right? But then I look at last season, and the thing that was the biggest bane of this defense's existence was their ability to consistently do what they were supposed to do on first and second down. So what we did is we went out and we found a bunch of people who can do what they're supposed to do well on first and second down. Like, I look at Eddie Goldman, like, is he a priority free agent for a lot of teams? No, but does he fill an issue that came up from a coaching standpoint last year in terms of being able to sit double teams, own a gap on the interior? Yes. Dietrich Wise, is he going to blow anybody's socks off in terms of his ability to rush the passer? No, but has he played a lot of football, and is he incredibly consistent at being in the right gap and fitting runs correctly? Yes. And so I look at that and I say, if they can get more consistency from that group, right? They showed the ability to create pressure without the front four in that first Tampa Bay game. Like, I went back and watched that game and I was like, this is incredible, right? They're able to find one-on-ones, they're able to create overloads, they're able to blitz linebackers. They can do that on 3rd and 10 in a way that most teams can't. And Joe Witt Jr. has shown the ability to do that, right? So if they can just manage first and second down better, I think they're going to be a better defense. And I think that's ultimately what you're looking for, is saying, man, we can't find this top flight pass rusher, right? But we can find 4 dudes who are going to do exactly what they're supposed to do in the front. We're going to get a little bit better in the secondary, and then we're going to be better on first, second down, so we can be better on 3rd down. And she also talked about the game flow thing, which I think is an excellent point. Like, if this offense is what we think it's going to be, they're going to be able to play with a lead a lot more consistently, right? So that's where I look at it. And again, that's the coach in me, right? But the talent evaluator is like, dude, it'd be nice if we had somebody you just throw out there and win a one-on-one. You know what I mean? Like, that's what
it would be nice. Like, that's the thing. It's like 100% agreed. It would be nice. I also don't know that they missed on any opportunities to do that necessarily.
Who would they have done in free agency? Like, who would they have brought in free agency? Nobody,
like, I would have loved to sign Josh Sweat to the number that he signed with in Arizona, but I think he wanted to go play with Jonathan Gannon again, and like, I wasn't going to overpay for Josh Sweat.
Yeah.
So
he's not, again, like, I like Josh Sweat. I've always liked Josh Sweat, but is he a top 10 pass rusher in the NFL? No, he's not. And I think he's very good. Don't get me wrong. Like, would I like to have him here? Absolutely. But again, like, if that's the number one guy, is that moving the needle? Is he like the guy that teams have to be sort of crazy aware of? Like, when you watch Josh Sweat, yes, he's really good. Can he win one-on-ones? Yes, but not with the same consistency as those top 10 guys in the league. And I think that's the distinction I would make there, is there wasn't that guy to go pay and bring him in.
Well, and then you even go a step further and say, okay, $19 million for Josh Sweat, or $5 million for Dietrich Wise, $3 million for Eddie Goldman, and like whatever other money was spent on that D line as a whole, and that gets you way better on first and second down than one Josh Sweat would be. And is that actually a better way to be a better defense and not just say accumulate sacks or guys with double-digit sacks, which is not actually the point of the sport. It's to be good at defense.
And that's something you brought up before, and I think it's a really good point with the Trey Hendrickson thing, right? It's like, he is a great player on a terrible defense. And like, all of the impact of those 17 sacks is negated because the defense can't support him, right? So now you've kind of done it the other way. You're saying we're going to build the floor of the defense. We don't have that ceiling. We don't have that player that really brings that tremendous pass rush upside, but the floor is consistently better. And is that going to make our team better? And my gut as a coach says, yes. You've got 4 new dudes that you can trust to do exactly what you're supposed to do. And that seems like the right decision.
All right. That's our show for today. Thanks again to Mina for coming on. Great conversation with her as always. Logan, looking ahead to next week, I truly, honest to God, have no idea what we're doing next week. We'll do a mailbag early in the week.
I sent you some mailbag
yeah,
stuff.
you sent me some good mailbag questions. They were long questions, but that's okay. I feel like I don't want to be insulting about how long they were, but in the same way that Mina realized when she talked about my email that she made it sound like I sent her a novel, and which was not the case, which is why she was like, not long. But we do have some good mailbag questions that some folks have sent Logan. I've got a couple of stashed as well. So we'll do that on Monday. We'll figure out what we're doing on Thursday. Maybe try to get another guest on the show. So anybody that you want to hear from, leave us a comment on YouTube at the Team 980, at 1067 The Fan, at Craig Hoffman. You can also shoot us a note for your mailbag questions at hoffmanshow.com. Or if you're an Instagram user, that's an easy way to get it in at hoffman.sports or at Logan_Paulson82. All right, that's enough ways to contact us. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week back here on Take Command.